Hi, welcome to EDSC 550. This is week 6, and we are continuing the work with everyone doing staff reflections. This is chapter 6 of our work. So we're using NTSS to ensure that we continue the work with equities and inequities in advocating for our students uh, as school counselors and making a comprehensive school counseling program. So, what does that mean when we're continuing the work? So, there's an old parable that is called Babies in the River. It's a wonderful parable that often was told to illustrate the differences between prevention and intervention. And so it goes a little bit like this. On a spring afternoon, after the students left on a minimum day, a group of students a group of counselors walked to a nearby park area next to a river to eat lunch together for the first time all year, as they rarely even ate lunch at all. This was a treasured event. A few minutes of talking and eating, Mariana, the school counselor with the alpha caseload A, noticed a baby floating down the river. Alarmed, she jumped up to assess the situation. As she did, she noticed several babies floating. She screamed for her colleagues to assist, and for the next 20 minutes, they retrieved dozens of babies out of the river until finally the babies stopped floating by. Exhausted, she returned to her picnic and realized that Jewel, the school counselor with the alpha caseload MX to SM, was missing. Where was Jewel? Pretty soon, Jewel is heard whistling down the walkway. They inquired, "Where were you? We were busy rescuing babies, and you were nowhere to be found." "Well," she commented, "I decided to go up the river to see how they were getting in. Turns out someone in their wisdom decided to build a preschool next to the river. I noticed that the door had a broken lock. So first I fixed that. Then I realized the babies didn't know how to swim. So I taught them. Then I learned that the teachers had no floaties. And so I bought floaties and put them near the exit. So if any babies fell in, they can throw a floaty in the water to assist them. Finally, I filed a complaint with the city to ensure that no one ever builds a preschool within a mile of a river again. Though no preventative approach is almost always the most appealing, it can be difficult for school counselors if they think that shifting to a preventative approach means turning their backs on those students currently in need. It also not always obviously how to work within the system to dismantle change and redesign how it functions, to build it differently, to partner to train those on the front lines to support the frontline intervention and to assist them to understand how to provide first level interventions and supports. But this is going to be a requirement if school counselors are going to meet the needs of all students because there's just not enough time to rescue every drowning student, hypothetically, and far too many in the caseload. So the parable of the river was slightly different, but basically it's used to figure out how to address a drowning situation. So often school counselors triage, and as we are triaging, we have tendency to focus on the triage and just handling the situation at hand. But we're not going back to see why is this happening. And in the case of Jewel, she went all the way up and handled all the different situations that were occurring first. And then that stopped the babies from floating in the river. And then we no longer had a preventative situation, but we now have addressed all of the root causes and then moving forward. So, do we spend 90% of our time with 10% of our students? I think most of us have, done this over the years, spent triaging all day long and never feeling as effective towards the end of the school year. Like, how many people did we help? What did the data show? Because we were constantly just dealing with the situation at hand. So, do we spend our days just rescuing the babies, servicing only those students that are in crisis, or do we go upstream and prevent babies from getting into the river? So, creating a preventative and educational system of change. And do we serve all students as our professional standards require us to do? Because when we are doing a preventative measure, we catch everyone and we kind of address all of the needs that are available. So we had the starfish story, which was one day a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy hurriedly picking up and gently throwing things into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "Young man, what are you doing?" And the boy replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." The man laughed to himself and said, "Don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't make any difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the surf. Then, smiling at the man, he said, "I made a difference to that one." So, again, the starfish is for, are we going to try to serve one kid at a time, or are we going to create systems that service them all? So, the starfish is, yes, we made a difference with that one student. That's that old mentality, because we have a lot of students in crisis. And so, we need to make sure that we have a measure that will assist all students. So our school counseling program, we're kind of focusing on the tier two and tier three, and what is the counselor's school role in tier two and tier three supports? Okay, and remembering that the students are need tier two or tier three supports. They are not a tier two or tier three student. So in this, we're doing small group, individual, or referral to resources. We're doing consultation and collaboration in tier two. So we're going to develop these tier three, two supports across three domains: the academic, the college and career, and the social emotional. So some students need more, but which ones? And how do we go about designing that? And how do we know? So, what can you justify why your students should receive a tier two support and others who may or may not qualify that? So, we're going to look at our process, our participation data, which students are most or least advantaged by the current tier two school counseling supports. Is it the squeaky wheel, or are we using data that really justifies the support? So we don't want to just give it to the support to that family or to that student that just cries for the support, but we want to make sure that the data indicates that we're using it appropriately. And we want to consider how we create systems that use attendance, engagement data, behavioral data, and other outcome data to qualify the students for that tier two support. So again, remembering that the supports are tiers and not students. So we don't say that a student is a tier two student. We say that students who need tier two supports. Okay, so how do we identify those supports for those tier two students, right? How do we identify the students that are in need of our tier two supports? So we use our data matrix, and we can use our LCAP goals, our school-wide goals, which we talked about earlier in this class. And you use that when you filled out your um, achievement gap plan. And then we ensure that it helps to ensure that students don't get missed, because we're using this data and we're setting the criteria for all students. And so no matter what the case may be, all students will be receiving this this intervention. It makes it more objective than just referrals and less implicit bias. And it helps us to prioritize our use of time. Okay, when we use referrals only, it doesn't show the need. Like when a student is acting out differently one day. So, a student can accrue behavioral data in a week. They can have 6 incidents in a week, and you say, "What's going on? What is happening to that student? What has happened to that student?" So that's why we don't want to go specifically just on referrals, because the student could be having a bad week. And something could have happened that week, or it could have been an anniversary of something traumatic. And so we don't want to just totally just use referrals. We want to be cautious with high level subjectivity, cultural implications. Implicit bias often results in over referrals of certain groups. And we want to evaluate our referral data often, which students groups are referred most and least, and which staff refers most and least, and our staff following our discipline behavioral chart. Okay, so this is Whitney's watch list. And so as we look at her data here, why might it have been inequitable for her to just use just referrals, okay? Because we might miss them, we might miss a group, we might, we have a staff member that could be over referring because they're exhausted or tired. It could be right before spring break, and we're seeing an uptake in student referrals from teachers due to how they're feeling. So we don't want to just go off of just referral data. So being data driven at tier two doesn't mean waiting for data from teacher referrals. We have to be proactive, and we need to do it at regular intervals to qualify students for those tier two supports. So at some point, we need to review all of the data, and we're on trimesters. So trimesters is what we would use at that time. So we want to make sure that at the end of try one, try two, and then try three for the upcoming school year for those students that remain there. That's what we want to use as targeted times to take a look at all of this data and program what our students may need. We need to align our data matrix with the district strategic priorities, our school-wide goals, and our school-wide counseling program goals. So let's take a look at this, okay? Tier two student needs, deficiencies. Students are struggling with attendance or engagement, struggling with appropriate behavior, and students are struggling academically. Missed opportunities. Students are not involved in extracurricular enrichment opportunities. Families who haven't logged into their students' grade portals, haven't enrolled in rigorous courses, and haven't completed post-secondary applications or financial aid. So there's deficiencies, there's missed opportunities, and then there's our student group. Okay. With our student group, it is disproportionately represented in school attendance, behavior, or academic data. Examples of this are Black and Brown students, foster youth, those that are in transitional living situations, English language learners, historically underrepresented, oppressed populations. Okay. So we want to make sure that we are focusing on our missed opportunities in our student groups instead of our deficiencies in our tier two. And that's what we're going to use to drive our thing. So let's give an example, like so if a student missed more than 10% of classwork, is this a deficiency, a missed opportunity, or a student group? It's a deficiency because, the student is missing more than 10% of their classwork, right? Foster youth in the building have dramatically higher truancy rates than their peers. Is this a deficiency, a missed opportunity, or a student group? It's a student group, okay? Students with 2 or more Fs or 1s or Is on the first quarter report card. 1s are for the elementary students. So is this a deficiency, a missed opportunity, or a student group? It is a deficiency, okay? Latinx males are underrepresented in the elementary school's gifted and talented program. Okay, is this a student group? or a missed opportunity or deficiency. It's a student group, or it could be a missed opportunity if the onus is on the students or the families to enroll. So we need to look at if they are required to enroll and they haven't done so, then it's important that it could be a missed opportunity. 64 college eligible seniors have yet to complete the FAFSA. All right, is this a missed opportunity, deficiency, or a student group? It's a missed opportunity because we provided them with the information and they're eligible and they're not following through. And we've made multiple announcements and they have yet to fill out. And out of the 36 students flagged for 3 or more behavioral referrals, you notice that 27 are Black male. So is this a deficiency, a missed opportunity, or a student group? That final one is a student group. All right. So what we would use at this time is the Closing the Gap action plan. And we would use this to create what type of lesson plan we would do to assist our students in that need the tier 2 intervention. All right, so we need to choose a metric that's aligned with our school improvement plan, and we'll see that on our LCAP. And we need to determine our data-driven tier 2 intentional interventions, and these are the different examples of opportunities that you could have, like, how many absences. So the data element for the targeted intervention, we would put in the number according to our LCAP survey goals. So like for attendance, our group is looking at, we need to have students that are in school at least 93% of the time. So when I'm looking at students that have missed at least 1 to 2 days a week for a month, that would be a targeted. So 1 to 2 days a week, full day absences. And then I would use that and to create a small group for them, like the importance of coming to school. Why aren't they coming to school? And maybe I would target that behavior, the number of referrals, study habits, citizenship, homework in class, promotion and retention. And then there's other academic data points, college and career data points, and social emotional data points. Okay. So you want to align your tier 2 qualifiers with other schools across your district or county to add impact. So this is really important that we are using our district and county results. And when we're talking about it for our tier 2 students. So what is a tier 2 for college and career? In K-8, it rarely happens because, college and career is mostly includes supports for special populations. And so like first generation. And so in K-8, we're giving it to everybody, right? In 912, it would be short credits to be eligible for college, AP potential, qualify but did not apply to college, applied but undermatched, no FAFSA scholarships application, showing early signs of melting, like summer melt, they're getting that senioritis. And then our special populations, historically underrepresented, foster homeless, our EL population, students with disability, undocumented, and our first generation. So what's one metric we can use to begin to identify students for our tier 2 supports? And how might we advocate for a better data capturing system? All right. So we want a student-centered data informed decision-making cycle. So we want to analyze our data to identify the needs and gaps. We want to write SMART goals and determine our root cause for the students that are struggling. And then we want to select interventions that match that root cause. And then we want to select standards and write measurable objectives. And then we want to develop a pre and post test to measure the students' learning when we create our individual lesson plan. And then we want to write lesson plans for the intervention and plan for the logistics. So we might in a intervention group, we would probably do anywhere from 6 to 8 lessons to ensure that we're teaching the same skill. And we're teaching on giving them multiple points on in a specific area, such as independent attendance and the importance of coming to school and how to study and writing goals. So these are all things that we would put in our lesson plan, and persistence. I'm doing this one right now, and I'm talking about when things get hard, what do we do? So I'm giving them all these different strategies so that they don't feel like they shouldn't come to school because something is hard or they pretend to be sick. We talk about emotion in there. So I'm hitting all of the areas with attendance. Could it be that I'm feeling anxious today? Why am I feeling anxious? Does it have something to do with the school, or does it have something to do personally with me? What are the strategies I can use to get rid of my anxiety? Teaching them those skills and helping them to get through it so that they can continually attend school, because oftentimes they will want to leave school early in the K-5 situation, say that they're feeling sick, and then they miss their schoolwork, and then their grades go down, but they're average students. So we want to make sure that they're getting that. And then deliver their intervention and then the pre and post tests, see if they've learned something new and if they're applying it, analyze the data, the outcome data to determine how we can improve it, and then share the results. Okay, so sometimes we get the results and sometimes not. 6 to 8 sessions normally doesn't change a whole lot of behavior, but sometimes we can give them skills. When the students are smaller, applying the skills every day is what is the most challenging part for counseling, and just constantly reminding them of it. Right. So, what are we doing well? That would be our reflection. What could we do more of? What do we need help with? And how can we hold ourselves accountable for sticking with this cycle in our daily work? So now we know which students have data-driven tier two needs. And so what's our next step? We have to determine what is the root cause. So what's the root cause of the problem? And then, because we see the symptoms, we see the problem, but then we need to get all the way down into the root. Okay. So we want to make sure that we don't give the same intervention to all students in a fishnet, trying to, for a specific reason without attention to why they are struggling. So that's important. It's easy, but not necessarily effective. And this is why. We need to choose a pre-intervention survey to gather data on the root cause. I like coming to school. People are nice to me. I understand what I'm learning. I ask for help in school. I like being at home. So what is the root cause? And then we have it for older students. Um, the pre-intervention, we gather the data on the root cause, and then we use surveys and questions for students and family and staff to decide what is going to be our next step, right? So we do have some important considerations when we're surveying students: the protection of pupil rights amendments. And this gives the parents the right to have notice or consent before their child can be asked about certain subjects or protected areas. So these are the 8 protected areas: political affiliation, beliefs, mental or psychological problems, illegal or demeaning behavior, critical praise of others, sexual behavior and attitudes, legally recognized relationships, religious practices or belief, and income. So those are the protected. So when we're creating these surveys, these are the areas that need consent before we create these surveys. School counseling consideration: mandatory surveys equal active parental permission. That means the parents must give their permission. Voluntary surveys are passive, meaning you can give it out, but if they don't return it and say that they don't want it, then you can go ahead and have the student participate in the survey. Parents must be given a reasonable amount of time to inspect the survey. So our Healthy Kids survey isn't as a passive, no, it is a active parental permission, and when we give that out to students in grades 5, 7, and 11, the students must, get their parent permission in order to participate in the survey. Um, we have a curriculum that we do called No Go, and because of it has sexual content, but it is a passive parental permission. So we talk about how all students will receive it in this grade, and that they'll receive 5 lessons, and that the parents can review the lessons. And so you pass it out, and you give the first lesson, and then you don't come back for a whole week. So that gives the parent an opportunity to opt out. And if the parent opts out, then the student doesn't participate in the class lesson. And but you try to encourage them to, review the information, look at the slides, look at the video so that they can see and decide to opt in actually. And because it is for the betterment of them and getting, how to protect themselves from people who are trying to trick them into, um, grooming and things like that. So you want the parents to do it, but it is a passive parental permission. Recommendation is to have survey needs assessments that ask questions related to any two of the 8 protected areas vetted by a district legal team. So this is also very important. Okay. Um, so, what is the magic tier 2 intervention? So, the intervention that directly aligns with the student needs. So, that's where we go about trying to figure out, who, what, when, where, and how long, based on we're going to do it using the Ask a Mindset behavior data, the attitudes, the skill, and the knowledge, and then the outcomes, the achievement related data for attendance, the report cards and grades, discipline referrals and GPAs, promotion rates, graduation rates, AP, ACT, SAT scores, and post-secondary. So here are some examples of small group interventions for elementary school, mind up curriculum, zone regulation, second step, Boys Town social skills. And, all of these different curriculums have their pros and cons. So it's important to do your research and make sure. But these are the ones that most people are using, and they're evidence-based. So here's some examples of tier 2 interventions by domains. For middle and high school students, we've got the academic domain, the college and career domain, and the social emotional and behavioral domain. And then we have the equity, for our students. So where do you find all of these evidence-based interventions? I've mentioned to you the CASEL program guides, but there's other resources like SAM, SAMH, resources for school counselors, What Works Clearinghouse, Attendance Works, and Intervention Central. Okay, so don't reinvent the wheel. Also, these are great resources for you for your final assignment during week 8, which you'll be doing a lesson plan. Doing one of these lesson plans is excellent and also helps you to figure out, some of these curriculums and if it's worth purchasing. So this is us where you would fill out your worksheet and keep track of your direct supports and your indirect supports for your tier 2 group, and kind of list it and help yourself to keep track of the information that you need. And then uh, have this data for yourself, right? So then we have our tier three. It's intensified, it's short term, it's 4 to 6 weeks. It's for the very few students, 5 to 10% of your population. And it's appropriate for students who continue to lack progress and exhibit barriers to learning after receiving a tier two support intervention and then experience a crisis. That's another one. Transfer to the school with data that positioned them to having a higher need for tier three and that are not appropriate for group counseling or other short-term crises. Okay. So it's important when we're doing our tier three to school counselors refer out when students are in need of therapy. They may not provide therapy in school. So this is where we are referring out for ongoing intensive therapy oftentimes. And so because the student, we may have done some work with them in individual counseling, and we're still not seeing the growth that we need. So here are some examples of tier three in the academic, college and career, and our social emotional areas. And that is how we can continue this work by using our MTSS process and making sure so far we've learned about the tier one, and now we have finished up with tier two and tier three examples. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.